Welcome, everyone. This is a special meeting of the School Building Committee. Today is April 29, 2024. Our first order of business is the approval of the April 11 minutes. Is there a motion regarding those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve and then second from Mary. Are there any corrections? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. That brings us to the opportunity for public input. Is there anybody who would like to address the committee? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to the OPM update.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for the flexibility in shifting the schedule to accommodate some of the procurement items, which we'll get into a little bit later on. In terms of update, the sort of twofold. One is on the overall project, sort of where we're at, where we're going now that we're past settlements and sort of winding down, if you will, on the project itself. So there was a discussion last week about where to sort of draw the demarcation between the formal school project and then other scope items to be taken on by the town. The reason for trying to find that demarcation is that as part of the grant process through the state, there needs to be a formal acceptance of the school through the Board of Education to start the clock on the grant payback period, if you will. So the very long story short is that once you finish a project, once it's accepted, you can't have a new project for another portion of the school for 20 years. So you want to start the clock on that, so that way you're not getting waiting 5 years down the road, realize no one approved it, and all of a sudden it's a 25-year clock as opposed to a 20-year clock. And colleges have had clients where we're brought on board and that's not been the case. And there's been issues where some districts might have had to pay back some of the grant money because they did a project too soon or whatnot. So we're working on what the demarcation is in terms of finances, working with the Board of Education to get that approval formally done. That doesn't stop some of the work that we're planning on talking about today. It's just, like I said, sort of a clean break in terms of documentation and finances and things of that nature, so that one process doesn't inadvertently mess up anything else. So more to come on that, but just wanted to report out on that. And then the other big item that was in the packet was the final commissioning agents reports. Some of them are, again, required through Connecticut high performance building requirements through the grant process. But the big one that I think is probably of interest is the final measurement and verification report, which looking at the period from March 2023 to through the end of March 2024, I believe it is. The school was operating at net zero. So I think it was 38,000 kilowatt hours was returned back to the grid. So building produced 38,000 more than it used. So that's been the goal. There's sort of a long 12 months process of collecting the data. And when do we find out? Well, after you go through a full year of real usage. So I was coordinating with Kohler Ronan, and they'll be updating the building into there's like a net zero database for verified outcomes. So that's just one thing I thought was sort of a final good data point for the process. We all know the building was has been working pretty well. Obviously, there's hiccups and comfort issues and things of that nature, but sometimes it's just what's are the solar panels producing enough? Is the building efficient enough? And the answer is yep. And it actually it's anticipated to get a little better even just because that heat trace that we had the change order for programming, that was sucking up a lot of energy. So that should help in that regard. And obviously the future. Oh, go ahead.
This was so important to the town. I think this is worth some kind of a public acknowledgement and celebration. I'm not quite sure whether it's the council thing to do, but we should certainly have a press release at the very minimum, some kind of a celebration about it. We did what we said we were going to do, and that's a really important statement.
I would echo that. I think, we should have some conversation around the details of what that might look like, but certainly a huge milestone.
Yeah, that was tremendously good news, really. I was very excited, and I was telling all kinds of people about it that we had nothing to do with the school building, but they heard about it.
Yeah, appreciate Adam not, as he said in the email, not burying the headline, right? So,
Yeah.
Couple hundred pages of light reading and technical reports. I figured to just, give you the executive summary in one line up front. Otherwise, just in terms of other tasks, there's following up on some of the additional bigger items that have come up with the building, trying to close out some of the invoicing and either whether it be work that still needs to be wrapped up or just hunting consultants down for invoicing and things of that nature. That's a lot of what Collier's been working on, besides some of, like I said, the procurement items that we'll be bringing up here shortly.
Okay, are there any general questions for Adam? Or do we have, Tony, go ahead.
A question. Is there any hesitation or reason why we shouldn't turn the school over to the school board or the town?
In terms of the sort of formal acceptance, the answer there is no. It's basically an acknowledgement of the Board of Education that the building was delivered and operating as intended. That doesn't mean that there aren't things to still resolve or items to fix or things of that nature. But in terms of the project itself, that's, like I said, that sort of demarcation line. And the items that the retention basin and the playground, we're talking about those scopes of work, those wouldn't be eligible for reimbursement anyway, considering it's rework, and that's some of the items that aren't eligible for reimbursement. So in terms of a financial standpoint, it's not like there's more money to be gained or similar by holding off. So that's why this topic came up now.
And the district's had the use of the building for a year. So this is.
Yeah, and my second question is, who do you turn it over to? I think the town owns the building.
That's correct. And so there's no physical turnover or closing or deed or anything like that. That's upon the certificate of substantial completion and certificate of occupancy, that effectively took place already from let's call it a legal standpoint. This is a grant process acceptance, and that goes through the Board of Education, and the superintendent is sort of the applicant for the grant in terms of just procedural.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else for Adam before we move on? Okay, seeing none.
All right, so I will pull up the two items that are on the docket for procurement as part of agenda item 5. Both are related. One is for Richter and Segan, who, if you recall, was the landscape architect that was on the project, and one is for BSC Group, who had done survey work previously for the town for the project. Both are tied to the potential playground surfacing work that's been talked about for some time now. So in brief summary, the Richter Segan proposal, it's on a not to exceed basis, intended to capture documentation of what was installed where and at what elevations for both sets of playgrounds. So we need to know where the curbs actually were placed, where the playground platforms actually were installed, because there is a desire to, as Collier understands, there's a desire for the town to, remove rubberized surfacing and either replace it, or in the case of the big kids playground, have 100% rubberized surfacing. So there's a lot of subgrade work that needs to happen to either adjust slopes, or in the case of the wood chips, you have to take out the wood chips and build up the surface, the subgrade, so that way your rubberized surface, which is thinner than the wood chips, can be placed appropriately and be sloped appropriately. So there's just a lot of documentation work, both from a survey standpoint, which is why there's the BSC Group survey, proposal, as well as the Richter Seegan proposal to analyze the data, develop design documents and specifications, ultimately getting a package of what the scope needs to be so we can find a site contractor to do any of the soil and wood chip and rubberized surface removal work and build up the subgrades, and then subsequently a playground surfacing installer to put down the rubberized surface back everywhere, 100% on both playgrounds. I was going back and forth a bit with Richter Seegan about delineation of scope and, you know, what do we actually need? And my first question was, we have the pre-K playground, we basically are trying to get it the same way it was before. So is there a lot of work there? And that's where they explained the additional focus on some of the surrounding sidewalks and curbs. There's been a lot of review of the surface, rubberized surface itself, but need to make sure that the actual sidewalks are in the right spot, so that way they don't design subgrades that don't work out and they're an inch too high or an inch too low or whatever. That was where some of the development of the not hourly not to exceed component of the proposal came in. So that way, if it's very simple, not, you know, the town isn't paying an exhaustive amount of money that's unnecessary. But if it does require more analysis and work, Richter Seegan wasn't just hung out to dry for just presuming that everything was good. If the elevations ended up being not what was anticipated. And then similarly for BSC Group, for the surveyors, they did do survey work on behalf of the town during the project. And again, it's broken out by tasks, so that way, if an additional visit isn't needed, we don't call them out to do an additional visit, you know, things of that nature. It's more compartmentalized, so that way we're between Richter Seegan and BSC Group, we're identifying what scope is actually needed to produce the drawings that the contractor will work off of.
Okay, are there questions?
It seems to me that I had heard some discussion about the quality of the subsurface. And about uneven surfaces. Is part of this discussion?
The uneven surface, yes, this scope of work would identify and would develop the design to remediate any issues with subgrade heights or sloping, or if something is uneven between either in the rubberized surface itself or between the rubberized surface and the sidewalks, or by just naturally replacing the wood chips.
Right, and am I correct in remembering that, or am I fabricating?
No, there were disputes about whether or not some of the surfacing was sloped correctly or not. So this
Okay.
is, the point is that this would resolve them one way or the other.
So these two contracts are, one of them is not to exceed 37,000, and how much is the other?
Survey is
13.4.
13.4,
yeah,
okay.
it's in the motion. There you go.
Yeah,
13.4.
so we're talking about $50,000 just to get ready to do this.
Correct.
Is that necessary? Do we have to spend that kind of money just to get ready?
So if this work isn't done, the site contractor and the rubberized surface contractor won't know. No, the rubberized surface contractor wouldn't be able to do any work in the first place. The site contractor wouldn't know to what elevations they would need to build up the subgrade. So the rubberized surface just gets poured right on a sloped subgrade. And just looking at the larger kids' playground for this example, if you take up the wood chips, that height of the soil beneath, or the compacted fill, is not the correct height for rubberized surface. It needs to be built up to
Right.
some slope at some elevations. Someone needs to tell the contractor what to do to achieve that. That's what this work is doing.
All right, if we add this 50,000 to the project cost for putting down the new rubberized surface, what are we talking about?
Initial estimates for the rubberized surface were on the order of, for both playgrounds together at 100%, were on the order of 400,000 to 500,000. And then the subgrade work, that's to be determined, but if I had to estimate, don't hold me to it on this on this hip shot from the call, but I would say 50,000, 100,000, something like that. So it's
Yeah,
it's a
it's not-
substantial amount of work to remove the surfacing and put it back down and put down new rubber.
I would just say, when Adam shared, those numbers, I mean, they are significant numbers. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk. We want to get this right from a values standpoint, accessibility standpoint. So to an extent, it kind of is what it is. We obviously aren't a good budget situation overall with the project, but this would certainly claim a good chunk of that. But otherwise, the 50,000 or thereabouts for kind of the pre-construction, pre-installation work, that kind of tracks with what we expect when we engineer a project, somewhere in that 10% of overall value kind of standpoint.
Right, and the wood chips are a lot deeper,
Yeah.
right? And so that's not built up currently, and that needs to be built up. Steve has a question.
I understand that we're under budget for the project as a whole, but specifically now that we've turned the project over to the Board of Ed and we've settled, where does this money actually come from? Is it still bonded money from when we built the school, or is it come out of our regular operating, or how does that all work?
I'll say a blurb and then I see Amanda Backus.
I was going to say it's a finance
is on the
director
call.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. In short, we discussed how that transition would work, but there's not been we don't have the final format for how the monies would work. So maybe Amanda can talk to that, what the initial thinking is.
As of right now, it does appear that we bonded enough to cover the additional costs that we're going to incur. Me and Adam are going to be working through that over the next couple of weeks as we iron out the grant funded portion, but it does appear that we have enough money to cover all these costs.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay, are there other questions regarding these? Oh, well, just one comment here. We had worked with Richter and Segan before, and BSC through TSKP. And now we are just dealing with them directly, right, to avoid the 10% markup that TSKP would have. So. Okay, and then is there a motion? Well, I guess we'll do this separately. We'll do the Richter and Segan one first. Is there a motion regarding the Richter and Segan estimate?
I would like to move to approve the proposal dated for April 26, 2024 from Richter and Segan for an amount not to exceed $37,150 on a time and material basis for design and construction administration services for the playground surfacing.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Steve seconds. Thank you for all the second volunteers. Any final questions or discussion? Then all in favor of the motion, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions? I think that's unanimous. Okay. And then we have a proposal from BSC.
I'd like to move to approve the proposed, tongue-tied. Move to approve the proposal dated April 23rd, 2024 from BSC Group Incorporated for amount not to exceed $13,400 for survey services for the playground.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second? Okay, Rich, thank you. Any final questions? Then all in favor of the motion, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions? I think that's also unanimous. Yes, Steve has a question.
Yeah, I supported both of those motions. My question becomes, at what point is this the school building committee purview, and at what point does it become town council? Because while I think these were both very good things for us to have done, and I don't have a problem with it, where does the cutoff come where school building committee is spending the town's money, right? So is it at the end of the bonding, or is it at a certain date? Or I guess I would just look for a little clarity on that.
So not to speak for Adam and Randy, but it was last week we were catching up on a number of different things, but this was certainly one of the key questions, right? At what point do we kind of say that the committee's work is done? So I mean, Adam and Randy, if you want to kind of share kind of what thought process is emerging there.
What I heard from the meeting was as we go through this, again, sort of split and sort of demarcation, there isn't I think Amanda mentioned there's no bond requirement that the SBC approve things. And once we are past the grant project. There's no, the state requires that there be a school building committee for grant related project monies. So ultimately, it's a town decision on how to manage that. It is a good question that came up that I don't think we have a firm answer quite just yet. Some of it was just, let's get moving on, both the retention basin work and playground work. And then the rest will filter out over the next several weeks is how I would anticipate that working out.
Yeah, I think we'll get a little bit more clarity shortly on how much longer the SBC needs to meet, and how often.
There-
Though we've been doing it for 6 years.
It's the rest of its life. I don't think will be measured in years, though. Hopefully, yeah.
No, I don't think so.
There will be some cleanup items in terms of either old invoices or crossing Ts and dotting Is. So there will be some amount of meetings, but in terms of your point, I think Steve was about new work and authorizing additional scope. That's, I think, where the bigger question is on
Right.
that topic.
So we have the last couple big things. We got the retention basin and the playground. Those are kind of the two remaining major items.
Is the soundproofing concluded?
The acoustics, that's,
It's been procured. I think it's, well, obviously the one at the cafeteria was, I did get an email asking for clarification about what the status was of the order for the felt panels for the classrooms that were purchased. So in terms of authorizations, the answer to your question is yes. Obviously, they've not been installed yet in classrooms, and that's going to be an ongoing process as facilities has availability, as classrooms free up, that kind of thing.
and maybe Kate, if you're listening. Would you be looking for additional work in the cafeteria regarding acoustics, like replacement of some of those panels that are in there and painted? Or are we satisfied with where we're at?
I mean, I think we continue to add panels, and I think the work to add the panels has been helpful. I think, reading the report about what would be required and what would be gained from the replacement doesn't seem to be the appropriate next step. I think that, we're getting some impact and we continue to see improvement. So no to the removal is my first answer. But the increasing of, any of the spaces that we can cover with the panels and other ones, we've seen improvement in the classrooms. They're also colorful and fun, and they bring life to the room. So we don't mind continuing to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other, Tony, you have another question?
No.
Okay.
Do you need a motion on the
Uh,
invoice packet?
Okay, when, that would be the next thing then. Adam, you have a few words to say about the invoice packet?
A few. It's fairly straightforward for this this packet. The heat trace installation, which was complete. The two invoices from our commissioning agent, they're almost close out. I think they have, memory serves, either like $800 or $1,100 left, which we anticipate submitting for a final closeout of their services in the next packet. The monthly Colliers invoice, and then TSKP's invoice number 47 for $6,800. TSKP is also effectively at the end of their services. They have some small amounts remaining to get closed out, and we'll work with Richard and TSKP on that front. But for all intents and purposes, they're mostly finished. So total packet amount for $23,548.88.
Well, I'd like to move to approve the invoice packet dated April 29th, 2024, including invoices from ABS, CES, Colliers, and TSKP for a total approval of $23,548.88.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second? Chris McNamara seconds. Thank you. All in favor of approving the motion regarding the invoices, please indicate. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous also. It's not even half an hour yet. See, oh, okay, all right. Then I would, since someone have Some of us have Little League responsibilities. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Tony's our second. Chris, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. We'll see you next time.